The police slammed the door shut on a terrified teenager. While the real owner of the car sat quietly in a courtroom, watching. Red and blue lights. Hands shaking. A 17-year-old accused of grand theft auto. They said he stole the vehicle. They said he was lying. They said the evidence was open and shut. But something about this arrest felt wrong. Too rushed. Too cruel. Because the car wasn't hot-wired. There was no broken window. No forced ignition. So why was this kid in handcuffs? The officers didn't know one detail. One name. One connection that would flip the entire case upside down. And when the judge finally looked up from the file, the room went dead silent. What happens when the person judging you turns out to be the person you belong to? Stay with me. Because when the truth comes out in this story, it doesn't just change the verdict. It destroys everyone's assumptions. They say justice is blind. That the courtroom doesn't care who you are, where you're from, or what your last name is. But what happens when the system moves too fast? When assumptions replace truth? And when a teenager is labeled a criminal before anyone asks the right question? This is not just a story about a stolen car. It's about power, perception, and a mistake that nearly destroyed a young life. A single arrest. A single courtroom. And a secret so unbelievable that when it finally surfaced, even hardened officers couldn't look each other in the eye. Tonight's story will make you angry. It will make you question authority. And by the end, it will remind you how easily the innocent can be crushed by the system. So stay with us until the end, because the twist waiting in this courtroom doesn't just change the case. It changes everything. The night was cold. Too quiet. Marcus Hill tightened his grip on the steering wheel as the flashing lights filled the rearview mirror. Red. Blue. Red. Blue. His heart dropped. He pulled over immediately. The car hummed to a stop beneath a flickering street lamp, engine still warm, hands already raised before anyone asked. "Step out of the vehicle," a voice shouted. Marcus obeyed. He was 17. Skinny. Wearing a hoodie 2 sizes too big. Coming back from a late shift at the grocery store. Within seconds, he was face down on the asphalt. Cold cuffs snapped around his wrists. "What's going on?" he asked, voice cracking. "I didn't do anything." The officer didn't answer. Another ran the plates. Then everything changed. "This car was reported stolen," the officer said flatly. Marcus froze. No, that's not possible," he stammered. "That's my mom's car." The officers exchanged looks. "Yeah. Right. They'd heard that one before." Marcus was shoved into the back of the patrol car as neighbors peeked through curtains, phones glowing, whispers spreading. By morning, the story had already written itself. Teen arrested for grand theft auto. No one asked how he had the keys. No one asked why there was no damage. No one asked why the registration was current. They booked him anyway. The interrogation. The room smelled like old coffee and disinfectant. Marcus sat alone, cuffs digging into his wrists, staring at a table scratched with names of people who'd been there before him. A detective entered, file in hand. "You want to tell me where you really got the car?" he asked. Marcus swallowed. "I already told the officers. It's my mom's. She lets me drive it." The detective sighed, tired, annoyed. "Your mom reported it stolen this afternoon." The words hit Marcus like a punch. "What?" "No, she wouldn't, she didn't." "Son," the detective cut in, "we know how this goes." Marcus felt the room spin. "My mom is a judge," he blurted out. "Judge Elaine Hill. County Court." The detective laughed. Actually laughed. "Nice try." The interview ended there. The courtroom. 2 days later, Marcus stood in shackles. His public defender whispered, "Don't expect bail." Marcus scanned the courtroom. His mother wasn't there. His stomach sank. The judge entered. Everyone rose. And then Marcus looked up. The blood drained from his face. It wasn't just a judge. It was his mother. Judge Elaine Hill froze mid-step. Their eyes met. The courtroom went silent. Not a sound. Not a breath. Her gavel hovered in the air. She looked at the file. Then at Marcus. Then back at the file. Her hands trembled. "Court will take a brief recess," she said, voice tight. Gasps rippled through the room. The prosecutor went pale. The officers stared at one another. Because in that moment, they realized something terrifying. They hadn't just arrested a teenager. They had arrested the judge's son. For stealing her own car. And this is where everything breaks apart. Because what Judge Hill does next puts her career, her reputation, and her son's future on the line. The courtroom doors slammed shut. Behind them, chaos waited. Inside chambers, Judge Elaine Hill stood perfectly still, her back to the room, hands pressed against the cold wooden desk. Her reflection stared back at her from the dark window, not a judge now, not a symbol of the law, just a mother who might have failed her son. Marcus sat across from her, shackled, eyes red. "I didn't steal it," he whispered. "I swear. I was just driving home." Elaine closed her eyes. She knew he wasn't lying. But knowing the truth, and proving it, were two very different things. The conflict of interest. The prosecutor, Mr. Caldwell, cleared his throat. "Your Honor," he said carefully, "this is a serious conflict of interest. You must recuse yourself immediately." Elaine nodded. "I already intended to," she replied, her voice steady despite the storm inside her chest. "But before I do, I need answers." She turned to the arresting officers. "Why was my son charged without verification?" she asked. One officer shifted uncomfortably. "The vehicle was reported stolen, Your Honor." Elaine's eyes sharpened. "By whom?" Silence. The room suddenly felt too small. The prosecutor checked his file again, brows knitting together. "According to this, the report came from Judge Elaine Hill." Marcus's head snapped up. "What? Mom, I never." Elaine's breath caught. She remembered the call now. 2 days ago. Late afternoon. A rushed voicemail from court security saying her vehicle had been flagged as abandoned near the courthouse parking lot. She had assumed it was a clerical error. She told them to handle it. Those 2 words echoed like a gunshot. Handle it. The system did exactly that. The mistake. Elaine straightened. "That report was not an accusation," she said firmly. "It was a misunderstanding." The officers looked uneasy. "The system automatically logged it as stolen," one admitted quietly. "And once it's in, we act. No follow-up. No confirmation. No call." Marcus had been swallowed by procedure. Elaine felt something dangerous rising in her chest. Anger. The public humiliation. By the time court resumed, the room was packed. Word had spread. Phones buzzed. Whispers echoed. A judge's son. A stolen car. A scandal brewing. Elaine officially recused herself, stepping down from the bench as another judge was assigned. Marcus stood alone at the defense table. The prosecutor pressed forward. Regardless of family ties, Caldwell argued, the defendant was found operating a vehicle reported stolen. Marcus's public defender finally spoke up. "There is no evidence of theft. The defendant had keys. Permission. And no intent." The new judge leaned forward. "Call your first witness." The testimony that shook the room. Elaine Hill was sworn in. Not as a judge. As a witness. Every eye followed her as she took the stand. "Did you give your son permission to drive the vehicle?" the defense asked. "Yes," Elaine answered. "Frequently." "Did you ever accuse him of stealing it?" "No." "Did you know he would be arrested?" Her voice wavered for the first time. "No." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The defense continued. "Would you like to explain how this report was filed?" Elaine did. Every detail. Every assumption. Every failure. When she finished, the room was dead silent. The judge turned to the prosecutor. "Do you wish to continue?" Caldwell swallowed. "No, Your Honor." The verdict. The judge didn't hesitate. "All charges are dismissed," he said firmly. "Effective immediately." The gavel struck. Marcus exhaled like he'd been underwater for days. The cuffs were removed. He was free. But the story wasn't over. The aftermath. Outside the courthouse, cameras waited. Microphones were shoved forward. "Judge Hill, do you believe the system failed your son? Should officers be held accountable? Will you resign?" Elaine stepped forward. She didn't hide. She didn't dodge. "Yes," she said clearly. "The system failed." Gasps. When procedures replace humanity, innocent people suffer. Including my son. That clip went viral within hours. Millions watched. Comments flooded in. This could have been any kid. If it can happen to a judge's son, imagine everyone else. Justice isn't blind, it's rushed. The consequences. Internal investigations followed. New protocols were introduced. Mandatory verification. Direct owner confirmation. Accountability measures. The officers involved weren't fired, but they were retrained. And Marcus? He didn't speak to the press. Not once. But weeks later, he did something unexpected. He enrolled in law school prep courses. When asked why, he answered simply. "So I can protect people like me, before it's too late." Elaine watched him one evening, studying at the kitchen table, light spilling across his books. Pride filled her chest. And guilt. Because she knew the truth. If his last name were different, this story might have ended very differently. Final message to viewers. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a warning. A reminder that justice depends on people, not paperwork. If this story moved you, hit like. Subscribe for more powerful stories that expose the truth behind the headlines. Because the next person in handcuffs might be innocent too.